Welcome to the Prime People Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Conoco, and this is where we help entrepreneurs and real estate agents learn a ton about media, sales, marketing, branding, and strategy. We do that by opening up my Rolodex and giving you unfettered access to legitimately black belts that are doing this at a very high level. And today's guest is just that. He has been on Broadway. He's an Oprah connoisseur. He has ran presidential campaigns, and I've worked with him hand in hand with the SERHANT crew to help us build two of the most powerful brands in Canada when it comes to real estate and media. So, before I bring him on the show, I need to actually share with you something that's going to really set the stage for what we're going to do here. So I didn't even want to pull up his website until I started the live stream. Check this out. So the second I hit enter, it's going to feel like you're opening up a brand new iPhone. So this is Tyler Mount's personal website. I couldn't possibly remember all of the incredible brands he worked with. So I figured I would take you right to tylermountventures.com and show you. I mean, Biden-Harris, IBM, Playbill, Oliver Awards, SERHANT, Tony Awards, T-Mobile. It goes on and on. He is one of the most fascinating individuals I've met. I think because he's just cuts to the chase. He doesn't suffer fools, and he's just one of those people that will give you what you need to hear in terms of strategy in such a loving way. If you want to follow him, go to Tyler G. Mount on Instagram. Tap that follow button, send him a message, tell him how excited you are for this episode. And I'm going to bring him on right now. Mr. Tyler Mount, how are you doing, my friend?
I am so good. Thanks for having me, Justin. How are you?
I'm good. Is it kind of fun to look back and be like, man, look at all these people I have done work with?
It's actually wild because I mean, like, I'm super lucky. I've lived a good life. I'm continuing to live a good life, but it's actually like, it's a cool moment, right? To literally be like, oh, I worked with them. Oh, I forgot I worked with them. Oh, that's really cool. A lot of the times in life, I don't know if you do the same thing, Justin, but it's like a lot of the times it's easy to be like, well, I'm a shitty person. I'm not good at what I do. I've never done anything cool. And then it's great to remind yourself sometimes. So thank you for that. I appreciate the hype.
It's all good, man. And I'm not just pumping your tires just to do it. Genuinely, I consider you a friend. And I think my favorite thing about you is you're an actual practitioner, right? Like, we can not talk for a couple months and I can come back to it, and you've leveled up, which inspires me to level up. So thank you for making the time to be on the show. But let's cut right into it. I mean, first and foremost, let's talk about like what the concept of branding means to you versus what you think maybe some misperceived notions of branding are out in the public.
Yeah, I mean, so look, I've worked with hundreds of real estate agents. I have worked with dozens, if not hundreds, of organizations at the highest echelons of most industries. And what I'll tell you is that a lot of companies and a lot of individuals, which if you're a real estate agent, if you are an independent contractor, whether you sell insurance or sell real estate, whatever that might be, a lot of people forget that you are your brand. And a lot of people forget that you are a company, even if I am just a real estate agent, Tyler Mount LLC, right? It's really, really important. And so whenever we talk about branding, the first thing people think of is a logo, right? That's great. That's a part of branding, but that's only maybe 5% of your brand, right? And the biggest thing that I think is really important here to understand is before we even get into this idea of branding, we have to understand what our brand is. And what is our brand? It's us, right? And when we start to be able to capitalize on what I call our North Star, this idea of why do I do what I do and why do I do it? That's when we can really start to figure out what that brand is. Now, keep in mind, without exception, unless you're very, very lucky, companies and personal success doesn't happen without a brand, right? And so it's really important that we dive in day one as the very foundational level of what we're doing, which is creating that brand.
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to use SERHANT as an example because a lot of my audience is intimate with obviously his content, and I always use it as an example, right? I say, look at the SERHANT Instagram account and look at Ryan's. Ryan's you identify with, and he's got millions more followers likely than the actual corporate account because you feel like you're going to Greece with him and the family. You feel like you're in the office with him grinding out these new courses and stuff like that. And you've had such a hand in designing that. I absolutely love that. So what's the methodology for that? Because sometimes people are confused, like, well, I just want to have one account and I'm going to keep it polished and not share who I am. So how do you approach helping people through that?
Well, the first thing I'll say is if you are on social and you're not projecting who you are as a human being, you've already failed, right?
Mhm.
People came on to Instagram and clicked that follow button for you, not for, I always use this example, not for the exterior facade of a building, right? Like, I don't care about the home you're selling. Why? Because I'm not in the market. And honestly, Architectural Digest has far better photos than what you're posting. Let's call a spade a spade. I actually followed you on Instagram to see you. And it's not just your professional life, because again, as a consumer, I don't care. The same way you don't care about the newest client I closed. Obviously, you're like, oh, congrats, man. But that's not applicable to you in your life today. So what I would say is, what we have to focus on is everything at the persona level. So we kind of look at accounts in two different ways. I rep individuals and I rep companies. Now, whenever we look at the analytics, it's very telling. I rep the former CEO of T-Mobile, John Ledger. Cool. And you will note that his personal Instagram, which is the opposite of curated, and we do that by design. He wants it to be very, very, it's me, come golfing with me, come running with me, okay? Cool. We do that by design, but you will note his engagement far supersedes in terms of the percentage than what T-Mobile does, right? If I went to 100 people, 100 of them are going to know what T-Mobile is. Maybe 4 of them would know who John Ledger was. Not because John isn't an incredible business person, but because there's more brand equity behind the brand. However, whenever we get on social, people don't like interacting with an entity. They like interacting with a person. So the second that we can show up to the table as a human being versus a business, that's when we see a massive increase in following and engagement.
There's so much to unpack there. And I love that you used him as an example, because as he's talking about golfing and living his best life, the people he's attracting are like, oh, I've been on that course, and they're making a connection. And the world's smaller than we think it is, right? A lot of times, people don't like the corporate brands as much because they do feel far removed from the human being and the people element. And I find the personal brand experience really helps scale the personal element. Actually, Levi Latzik just popped in, my boy from living in Dallas, Texas. I know he was in the Hamptons with Ryan. And it's fascinating because by proximity, you see the synergies between the different types of people that are there and what can be accomplished when you actually truly understand somebody's personal brand. Mm-hmm. So that said, we are going to touch on a few things in this episode. We're definitely going to talk about the data, because you opened my mind up to that about 2 years ago at this point. It changed everything for us. But let's talk about the opportunity zones in 2022. Mm-hmm. Where do you think people should be spending their time? People, I got to be on TikTok. I got to be on Facebook. I got to do a YouTube channel. I got to do this, that, and the other. I need a business card. Where would I even start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have said this for a very, very long time, even before I owned my own company. And it's this: limitations are that which free us. The idea, if I don't have to do everything at once, I actually can be good at a few things. Mm-hmm. I remember flying into New York City in 2013 when I was moving here, and just being so overwhelmed, flying in and seeing every window in every building and thinking of the limitless possibility here. And it wasn't until one of my friends and mentors was like, limitations are that which free us, right? I was like, wow. And I've taken that with me. So what I would say, first and foremost, we can make this decision, but it's important to note, let's not try to do everything at once, because then we become a really shitty generalist versus a really, really empowered specialist. So what I would say is, if we're talking about the trends, if we're talking about what is going to power us into the next few years, I'll remind you that half of my job is tracking trends, right? Mm-hmm. Now my job is very little execution. I have the best team on earth who executes for me and my clients. I'm the one tracking trends, holding court, and showing up to have a conversation with you, Justin, right? So with that being said, I will say the biggest things that we actually need to look at, which make me, in a good way, uncomfortable. Why? Because ideally it would be great, and I would be so comfortable just staying in Facebook and Instagram like we have the past 10 years. That's not the way the world works, right? So I would say the biggest trends that are not going to be trending soon, they're just going to be a part of life. First is TikTok. And I would say that we're already there. This is not like the future. This is like now the past. If we aren't actively creating content on TikTok, we are actively losing a consumer base. Not only is it the future consumer base that will keep you and your business alive, right? It is also the highest engagement rate on social, period. It is the same concept that I would say to people who work in print, right? We had these conversations 15 years ago with big print houses saying, hey, we have to switch to digital. We have to have an online ecosystem because you're not going to be able to sell a magazine in 10 years. No. We're going to stay with traditional ad spend. And guess what? They don't exist anymore, right? When was the last time you bought Vogue? You don't. You consume Vogue.com, and they make more money on the website than they do on the magazine, right? And so what I think the things we have to focus on are TikTok, right? Video creation. If you notice the most recent algorithm changes that happened this week on Instagram, your Instagram feed now looks like TikTok. And that's by design because TikTok works better, okay? From there, NFTs, right? Makes my eyes roll and cringe. Why? Because it is new. It is an exciting frontier. And when I say that there is such a commodity around NFT generation, and the majority of people don't even know how it works, and I'll be the first to tell you I'm no expert on it, client after client after client is coming to us saying, okay, you're a great digital marketer, but can you talk about NFT activation? And guess what? If I don't progress in the next 5 years to be an expert in NFT integration, then I own the company. And then the final thing I'll say is the metaverse, which again, makes my eyes roll and cringe. Why? Because I love, you know me, I love human interaction, right? And this is as close as we get now in the digital age. I sit at my desk for 12 hours a day. And ironically, when you think about it, I'm actually just sitting alone staring at a computer for 12 hours, not actually interacting. And so transacting and having conversations and business meetings in the metaverse is a novel concept, but it will be literally the way we transact in 5 years, 10 years. SERHANT is obviously revolutionizing that. And you know, innovators like Ryan or Gary Vee or any of these people are saying the same thing, right? And Gary Vee has been wrong in his career, but very little, right? And so we want to take heed and follow the trends, and the trends are pointing in that way. Now, again, not super comfortable, but if we want to innovate and we want to be at the top of our game, we have to be at the head of the curve.
Yeah, fascinating. I want to unpack a few of those things. The NFT portion, I explain it this way to people simply. If you have a kid and your kid plays Warzone and you're getting bills on your credit card saying he just bought a new skin, that's an NFT. Like, they've been around. And if you think that there's value in owning digital assets, then you believe in the concept. And I think what you're saying, we track to a lot. And I've thought about, you know, again, I'm kind of going off the rails here, but I've thought about the blockchain as a solution to the contract flow in a real estate transaction, because one of the biggest issues we have in the real estate business is Tyler sends Justin an accepted agreement. I send it to a lawyer. I send it to a lender. I send it to somebody else. Then we're going back trying to track that PDF. And if it got to it a secretary, or it wasn't signed the right way, or I get a corrupted file, it just destroys the entire process. And the inefficiencies really are what are probably one of the biggest problems in real estate. Now, I'm going to take that same concept and I'm going to go back to the content marketing piece. I'm going to link that with the TikTok, because I recently put a lot more effort into posting regularly on TikTok. I was kind of frustrated with the platform. I was like, I was just regurgitating the same content I was putting on Instagram Reels. But then I realized I could make it something different. I made it reactionary. I started doing duets. I started just doing a lot more run and gun. I started a series called Bombs from the Bronco, where I just share tips from my Bronco. And it's interesting because you're absolutely right. It feels like the machine is kind of grabbing me and being like, oh, okay, I know who you are, and putting me in the right places. So the way I like to think about it is using these multi-billion-dollar companies and technologies and treat them as if they're my employees. I feel like a lot of people, though, just sit there and they just consume, and they never learn to use it as a tool. So how can you break that pattern, stop me from scrolling, and help me start using it as a tool?
Well, let me tell you, it is the most terrifying and equally the most incredible tool we have at our disposal, like content marketing, as content marketers, right? I will say in a previous career, I was in charge of digital marketing for over $7 billion worth of real estate new developments here in the city, in Miami and San Francisco. And what I'll say is us harnessing that data was so incredibly valuable. Now, first I'll tell you, we've all seen the social dilemma. We've seen like these concepts that really like villainize social platforms. And in many cases, when we talk about the Cambridge Analytica scare and those type of things, that's real. That happened, right? But what I will tell you is, if we think that Mark Zuckerberg is in his room tracking what Justin Koniko's doing, it's a wild misnomer, right? You are a number, quite literally assigned an ID number, and the algorithm is just running a program, right? Every time you scan your pharmacy card, you've already agreed to the terms and service. They share that with Facebook. And honestly, my viewpoint is quite simple. I would rather have targeted ads. I want content that is geared towards me. Like, try to sell me a Broadway show, try to, sell me some type of fitness products. Like, I don't need to be served like, breast pumps and tampons, right? Like, it doesn't work for me, right? But there are humans that need to be served that. And so what I will say is our ability to harness the largest consumer base, which are social users, to better get the product in front of them is an incredible tool. Why? Because I always approach everything I do, and I ensure that all my clients approach it this way, is we have value and we're just here to share value. And the second we get out of our mindset of, oh, this is ego driven. Oh, this is about me. This is the Justin Konikow show. No. It's a Justin Konikow brand, sure, but I have inherent value and I want to share that value with you so that I can help you, right? And so that is how I look at content marketing and the incredibly targeted ads we can make. So to that end, and to answer your question, we would say, for example, imagine I was selling a pied-à-terre here in the city, a full buyout, right? The most expensive per square foot in the city, in the history of the city. How do I sell that? Well, traditionally, 10 years ago, you would do environmental branding in Columbus Circle, Fifth Avenue. You would also take out digital display ads. You would take out print ads in Architectural Digest, magazines that they, departures, magazines that are on planes. Why? Because they're pied-à-terres. We can't market to people in New York City. We have to market to people who are traveling here. Now I have the ability to say, for example, okay, I am going to, again, not revealed to me, I don't know your name, but I'm going to build a custom audience around every single person in the entire world who has swiped their credit card at an Aman, right? If you are at the Aman spending $1,800 a night per person, bare minimum, you can afford a pied-à-terre, right? And that level of service and concierge service is what they're looking for in a pied-à-terre. So my ability to say, okay, let's take the 100,000 consumers globally and target them, and then the people who actually interact with our ads, retarget them, and then build lookalikes based on those demographic profiles. That is how we use it as a tool. I don't sit and mindlessly scroll because I personally, despite it paying my rent, I hate social, right? But it's a necessary evil, and I just happen to be really good at it, right? I'm not posting for myself. I'm not scrolling. I'm figuring out how we can use it as a tool to better my clients and produce ROI for them.
I love it. Well, I've always told people that maybe are obsessed with The Sims or World of Warcraft or Second Life, if they put that kind of energy into understanding these platforms, it's kind of like World of Warcraft in real life. You can find gold and gems if you know how to approach it. 100%. 2 points there. I really do think there's different ways of approaching it, right? When you mentioned all of the bad press that it's gotten, you don't have to be that. You can do it from an ethical approach where you're saving that person that is staying at that $1,800 a night hotel the time of finding the perfect place, because you're using the data that's out there to serve it to them and say, here, look, I have a fantastic option for you. And then the video content is structured in such a way that if you're looking for a gorgeous pied-à-terre and the biggest tower in Manhattan, this is it for you. And then providing them the tour so they don't have to find it themselves, right? Like, think about how strategic marketing has become versus previously, here's 50,000 mailers. Hopefully I get the right guy. Like, what a different world we live in.
100%.
Yeah. So knowing that, I always wanted to talk with you about how do you find somebody like yourself and vet them from the noise out there. Everybody's a digital marketer these days. Any kid with $100 and a little bit of an aptitude to learn WordPress as a digital expert and selling courses and doing all these different things. But I would love to know, what type of questions, how do you budget for hiring somebody like yourself, track record, how do all these things factor in when maybe I do have the money to spend on hiring somebody to be a consultant in my space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked on both sides of agencies. I've hired multi-million-dollar agencies. I've consulted for agencies. And intrinsically, in my opinion, they don't work. And they don't work because they are massive organizations that are creating process for other massive organizations, right? And when you come in and try to disrupt that in the simplest way, like Justin Konikow is based on your business model, despite you being wildly successful, are never going to dish out $100,000 a month for digital advertising support. Additionally, if you came in and said, well, I actually kind of want these type of services, they would politely look at you and say, that's not what we do, right? That creates a massive white space in the market. Not only are incredible organizations not getting the service they need or deserve, but they're being priced out. So my goal was to say, frankly, that's just who I am. I'm like, I could do it better, right? And I do it better. And so what I would say is whenever you're looking for that support, the first thing I always get told is, I hate social, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, great, I don't want to do it either. I'm just good at it, right? And so delegate that to us. And there's so much fear because we're not cheap. Agencies aren't cheap. But I have founded this organization, Tyler Mount Ventures, as what I call the anti-agency, right? Forgive my language, but fuck the existing model. It doesn't work, right? And if you want the existing model, go do it and then come to me when it doesn't work, right? And so what we're doing here is very unique, right? We have founded this company on the idea that good people deserve good support. And sure, I have some fantastic, massive clients that pay the bills, but they also enable me to take the clients that I actually adore and love, right? And I wake up in the morning excited to serve them. And so what I would say is when you are looking for support, first, you need to know if it's the right time. The right time is whenever you are at full capacity. You then have to scale and delegate, or you're leaving money on the table. Now, whenever you meet with me and my team, we're full service, right? I have an in-house website department. I have an entire copywriting staff, technical copywriters. We just hired a full staff of in-house production team. So we can do everything from short form TikTok videos to Super Bowl commercials. We were nominated for 28 Emmys last week alone. So it's like we are creating some killer content. And the first thing I typically get asked is, it's scary because you are making an investment, both financially and with time. I look at every client, and unlike a traditional agency, I say, I'm not signing you to a contract. Obviously, we'll sign a contract so you know what I'm delivering and what you're going to pay me, but there's no year agreement. There's no 2-year agreement. Why? Because if I am providing value and I am providing ROI, you are never leaving me, right? And if I'm as good as I say I am, I don't need to tie you in, right? And so that is how I approach this. So ultimately, as a New York anti-agency, without an office space, I'm able to save money on brick and mortar and pass it on to my clients. So ultimately, the biggest thing that you need to look for whenever you are thinking about hiring an agency, we want to make sure that they're a right fit. Forget what they say they can do, because every agency is going to sit down and tell you that they're the best, right? How do you vibe? How do you connect energetically with those people? Because you are going to spend an insane amount of time with them. Okay. And then from there, talk about that success. Great. You have $100 and, you know WordPress, but are you really an expert? Who have you worked with? What are the case studies? Right. I'm not here to name drop, but we can name drop if we needed to, right. To show you, like, we have worked at the highest calibers. And then most importantly, when you get that proposal back, right, with that big price tag, right. And keep in mind, my team much smaller than a normal agency, but still a substantial investment. Let's run the numbers and I'll show you how you're going to make that money back plus some, right? So that's ultimately what I would say. But the biggest thing we need to empower consumers to do is release the fear. We have to delegate or we'll never be able to scale. And if, for example, your job isn't based in social media, you should be delegating it, right? Because Justin, your job is to garner leads and sell shit. My job is to support you doing that through digital marketing, and you shouldn't be spending time doing other things that don't support and ladder up to that North Star.
Yeah, and there's economies of scale too, right? So when I started out, I had a lot more time than I had money. So I was able to go belly to belly in that hand-to-hand combat. Actually, Matt LaMarche earlier on was jumping in and saying nothing will replace belly to belly. And you and I, Tyler, I think can say that there is that effect, but then it gets to the point where you have that scale and you have that brand recognition. And a lot of times, well, you got more money than you have time. It makes sense to start doing it at scale. And I think I love your approach of not signing a tie-in contract. We operate very similarly with our clients where I'm like, no, I'll earn your business. And I think we live in that time and space where, you know, the proof is going to be in the pudding. You'll find out really quickly if somebody actually has the mettle to execute. The other piece, though, is there's some exclusivity around who you are as a service provider, and there's a synergy between you and the client versus 90% of real estate agents will work with whoever for whatever fee just to get a sign up, and they're thirsty for it.
Yeah.
Same thing in the digital marketing space, right? Some people will just be thirsty for the business. What makes a great candidate? Who are the people you love to work with? And what can people avoid doing to maybe losing access to somebody like yourself?
Yeah. So at the beginning of my career, if you had a checkbook and you were going to write me a check, I do work for you, right? Now we're at the point that I really get to choose my clients. We work off a wait list. I have a roster wait list.
Nice.
And based on scale, budget, what you do, what you're looking to do, all of that is variable and really shows when you're going to get off the wait list onto the roster. What I will tell you, the number one thing I look for, it's not industry. It's not what you do. It is actually who you are at the core. Okay. What is your mission and why are you doing it? And then most importantly, I stress this in our pitches. I stress this in contract. I stress this at our implementation call and our onboarding call. It is, I need a partner, right? I am never going to call you my client. You are my thought partner. You are my colleague, and I'm here to grow your business with you, just like you're growing my business indirectly, okay? And the clients who are now former clients, who weren't happy, who didn't have a good experience, there's one thing in common. Not one of them agreed to collaborate with us. No reply to emails, not showing up. Yeah. It's impossible for me to do my job if I don't have some support inside, right? Especially as we nail down tone of voice and strategy and 30, 60, 90 and go to market. Like all of those things are really, really important. And you know the company better than I can today. Right? Sure, I can craft something, but you don't get to come back to me in 30 days and say, well, I didn't like that. Well, you didn't respond to my email. So that's ultimately what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a thought partner and a collaborator and someone who just like has great energy. And you've seen it a million times. I've seen it a million times. You get on a call with the wet blanket and I'm not interested because this is just as much as an interview for me as it is for you.
Yeah. And I think that's the approach people should be looking for, right? I always believe relationships are better when neither partner really needs each other, but they're better together than they are apart.
Absolutely.
And that energy, like I've seen that even on the real estate side, right? People come in, they say, here are my ambitions. I'm like, okay, here are your actions, but they're not willing to do the actions. So I'm like, okay, change your actions, change your ambitions. Like there's only real two choices that you have in front of you, right?
Right.
And with that said, before we even got on this call, I told you, I'm going to get you my homework on a weekly basis. I love the tactical advice that you give out, and I'm going to go back and fulfill that. But how do you help somebody become consistent when maybe they haven't had the time to be consistent at those things? Like they want to do it, they've got the energy, but they're trying to build a new habit.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite books, Atomic Habits, it is remarkable in our ability to really rationalize what habit making is. Okay. And if you haven't read it, you have to, right? So it's game changing. And what I will say here is it really just comes down. I wish there was a magic formula. It comes down to passion, grit, and grain, right? It's like especially having worked with hundreds, if not thousands of individuals, I will tell you 90% of them don't do the work. They just don't. And there's nothing wrong with that, but don't expect results. The people in my life on my roster who are doubling production, quadrupling production year over year, are the people who show up and do the work. I am the expert in this space, and I'm not the only expert. Let me be clear. There's so many people who know more than I do, but I am an expert in the space in something very specific. I'm going to tell you what to do. I just need you to do it. The same way if I came to you, Justin, and said, I need to buy a house in Canada, I don't know where to begin. I'm not then going to like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not then going to be like, I don't think that's right. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So please help, right? And so what I will tell you and what I have found is the epidemic in the world is people wanting results without executing, right? And being, owning an organization, being a CEO, it's like anything that I ask anyone on my team to do, I have done. And I've done for years, right? So writing social copy is very meticulous, but guess what? I did it for 4 years, every single day, right? Scheduling posts, I did it. I don't do it today, right? But I've paid my dues and I have that experience. So what I would say is, if we're trying to create a habit, right? You hear like, oh, it takes 21 days to create a new habit. I think that's bullshit, right? It's like, You can create a new habit today. You just have to stick with it, right? And then ultimately, you forget it's a habit. It's like me going to the gym. I go to the gym every day, right? It's just something I don't think about, right? The same thing with, do your homework. It's not that big of a deal, right? A lot of the times as human beings, just in nature, we overthink and we make something seem to be a massive task when I'm like, in the amount of time you complained to me, it could have already been done. Right? Whether it's posting on social or taking this photo or taking this call or sending that text, I'm just as guilty. So I would say, to answer your question very, very clearly, the number one thing we have to focus on is execution. And in order to make that habit, we have to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And we have to have that in mind. Because keep in mind, my favorite example is you wake up one morning and you say, you know what? I want to get in the best shape of my life. I'm going to lose 50 pounds. Great. You go to the gym, you come back, you're absolutely exhausted. You look exactly the same, right? We can't think about the results today. We have to think about the results in a year, right? And that's how I focus on habit building. I wake up every morning. If I'm on my best behavior at like 5, I'm at my desk by 5:15, 5:30 and getting work done because it's the only time people don't bother me, right? And my business isn't going to succeed or fail if I don't do that today, but in a year, I'll still have a business. Right. And that's what I try to think through.
I love the mind. You literally made me think of a new concept as you were speaking, because a lot of people, their eyes are on the results, but they're taking their eyes off the action. Meanwhile, the results are merely a latent indicator. They're going to be a result of the action. So if you can just keep your eyeballs on the actions, the results are going to come on their own, right?
Absolutely. And we can name a million things in digital marketing, like social. Tyler, I've been posting 3 to 5 times per week for the last 2 weeks, and I haven't even seen an increase in engagement. Of course you haven't, right? It takes 120 days, and 3 to 5 times isn't enough, right? So it's those small things that we're just going to think about executing day after day. And one day we'll look back, to your point, you started this conversation, this is full circle. You'll look back and be like, oh, I did do all of that. I don't remember half of those things. You know what I mean? And that's what we want to focus on.
100%. Yeah. So I recently did something I want to ask you about, and then we're going to jump into the rapid fire questions. I want to honor your time. I know you got a stacked schedule, but recently I wanted to get uncomfortable, right? I'm in the spaces that I'm in. I'm on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all those places, and I'm comfortable with where I'm at now. And then randomly, I saw some economists on Twitter talking. I'm like, this is an interesting conversational thread. And I looked at my Twitter account, and my follower ratio was ridiculous. I followed like 4,000 people, about 1,300 followed me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fix this. I downloaded an app called Tweepy, Tweepi, and I spent 3 or 4 days unfollowing everybody. Like, I just kept the people that are my core audience. I started building lists, and then I started building lists of press in the area that I cover. So now I'm building direct relationships with these people, and it's fascinating. It's one of my favorite platforms out of nowhere. And, the data side of that, explain to me like how an app like Twitter, or building the right audiences, or cleaning up your audiences, is so important, because I don't think everybody gets that concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Specificity is so incredibly important. If I am blasting the entire world for a product that's only meant for women above the age of 65, I'm not spending my time efficiently, right? And time is money, right? And so what I want to focus on here is to think about, like, why is Twitter successful in this entire equation? It's successful. Why? Because it's access. It is one of the most direct and easy ways to access anybody, any organization on earth, in a very, very casual way that you don't get inherently with Instagram or Facebook or TikTok even. Instead, I have the ability to, what I think of as writing an email to anyone on earth. Now, are they going to respond? Not all the time. But because we have that direct portal, and because access is so coveted in the online space, it's really, really effective. Now, in terms of audiences, we want to make sure that we are showing up for the right audience at the right time. Okay. And obviously, I'll let anyone follow me, right? But I'm not going to craft my message to appease new followers. I'm going to stay true to my message and who I am, and the irreverence of who I am, and the outspoken brashness of who I am. And if that appeals to a certain consumer, great, welcome. If it doesn't, unfollow, And so what I would say is ensuring that we understand every single platform has its own audience base. There are a lot of, overlapping people who follow across multiple platforms. But for the majority, the way that we interact and the way we transact on these platforms is very different. The way I'm talking to someone on Facebook is going to be very, very, very different than TikTok. right? Like almost as polar opposite as you can get. And understanding those nuances is just as important as understanding what content and the content strategy we're going to employ on either of those apps.
Well, you'll be proud of me, like one of your little kids grew up, because I've started to really change the way I interact on every platform. So I appreciate that breakdown. Cam
Yeah.
Cohen had a question before we get to the rapid fire. So he said, when you first start out, is it worthwhile to turn away business that doesn't fit, to focus on the customers that do fit, as long as you can still make ends meet, or just do you take everything from the start?
Well, look, I mean, I will tell you, my experience was I took everything. And I learned quickly that I'd rather not have the business because it costs far more to have someone on your roster that isn't serving you. And let me be clear, this isn't about being selfish. It's if I have a soul-sucking client, and we've all had one, and I will have another, okay, who for X number of dollars agreed that we would do Y, okay, but now they're asking for A, B, C, D all the way through Y for the same amount of money and is an absolute nightmare and terror with my employees. That's when I draw the line. Sure. I would rather lose the 10 grand a month than spend 20 grand in salary having to hire more people to offset your need to go out of scope. Right. So I would say, looking back, I wouldn't have taken those clients that I knew weren't going to be a good fit, but I wanted the paycheck. Did I still provide great service? Yes. Are they still here? No. Why? Because they weren't a good fit. Right. They wanted something that we don't inherently provide.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think they would affect your culture and hurt your organization in the long run more than anything else. Right.
I mean, like it's absolutely palpable. Right. The second I would make an announcement, hey, we let go of X client, the mood in the room, like when you tell your entire organization, hey, we lost business, and there's an applause, you understand it wasn't a good fit, right? Yeah. So that's typically how we approach that now.
I've been there. All right, I got a couple rapid fire questions for you, and I will get you out of here. So up to this point, what is the greatest lesson you have learned?
The greatest lesson that I have learned is lighting someone else's candle doesn't extinguish your own. All too often, we try to be super, super competitive. And I love that. I'm the most competitive. But by me talking bad about another agency or another client or whoever that is, not only is that not productive, it doesn't propel my business forward, it makes you look like an asshole. But most importantly, if you are really here to help people, the idea that by me helping Justin get ahead or Justin helping Tyler get ahead doesn't make Justin less successful. There is so much money and there is so much opportunity in this world. And coming from the world of performing arts, right? Broadway, it is the most cutthroat. If this person gets this role, job, position, that means I'm a failure, right? And recalibrating that had been instilled in me for decades was really, really game changing.
I love that answer. It's funny. And when somebody's in a room talking trash about somebody else and I'm there, in my head, I'm like, when I'm not here, you're probably talking trash about me too, right? So,
right. It's the first thing I do, right? If you, even like an employee, if an employee is talking shit about another employee to me, I know you talk shit about me. Like, you know what I mean? So I really, really try to, ensure that that's not the culture we're instilling, but also remind everyone I see that you helping someone else doesn't prevent you from succeeding.
I love that answer. What are you learning right now?
I'm learning so much. The number one thing I'm learning is how to scale a business, right? I've scaled many businesses that weren't mine, but I've never scaled my own. And it is a full-time job, Justin Conacal, let me tell you. We experienced such rapid growth because of the good work we were doing. And consequently, we outscaled what we could at the time produce. And so playing catch up for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months is exhausting. And now we're getting ahead of it. But the number one thing I'm learning is how to lead a multi-million-dollar organization, and most importantly, how to scale it effectively. Because now, for the first time in my life, I'm not only feeding myself, but I'm feeding 24 other people, right? And I take that very, very seriously.
Well, you got energy for days. So if I was in another world, I'd be riding right there with you, my friend.
100%. And no caffeine either. This is all natural.
I love that. You got to give me some tips there. How has failure shaped your life?
Oh my God, I failed so many times. And I don't even look at it as failure anymore. I just go, oh, I learned. Thank you. Right. And I have lost clients. I have completely fucked up client pitches, multi-million-dollar worth of business out the door because I said the wrong thing or I wasn't prepared. I have done the wrong things in terms of employee attrition, knowing how to maintain and retain employees. I have been told no more times than I can count. I've lost business more times than I can count. And if I could, go back and change any of it, I wouldn't. And I'm not being, I'm not trying to be like all Oprah-esque. It's like the truth, because all of the things and all of the failures that I experienced led me down the path to have a thriving business that we do now. So, I mean, it is what it is. And the trick here, and this is what revolutionized my life, Justin, is when the failure happens, you being able to recognize in real time that this is fantastic and I don't know why, right? So when an employee comes to me and says, hey, Tyler, I've had the best time working here for the last a year and a half, but I'm moving on to another company and they're my best strategist. In that moment, I go, okay, we're not going to panic. But most importantly, thank God you're leaving, because A, you're going to be happier. You're doing something you love. They're paying you more, maybe, great. But most importantly, I don't know why, but there's another person coming in that's right for whatever reason.
100%, man. You just unpacked so much. And I love, my favorite thing about the Prime People podcast is when I talk to practitioners, that's always the answer. I ask them that question and they light up. So anybody that's inspired by Tyler, please give him a follow. The most important question, because you carve time out of your schedule for me and my audience, I want to give you my platform. This will eventually get to millions of people. What are you working on that I can point them to? Is there anything that you want to shout from my mountaintop? My audience is yours, my friend.
Well, look, you're very kind. I didn't come here to promote myself. I came here to chat with you because I adore you. But, I would say like the biggest things that we're working on right now is revolutionizing digital marketing. And not in the traditional, every agency on earth is like, we're here to break the status quo. No. We're actually doing it from even our very basic model, right? I am looking to continue to collaborate and work with good people, the best people. Yeah. And that doesn't mean you have a Fortune 100 company, right? I am here to provide incredible value with my expertise, but most importantly, I have the best team on earth. I would put them against anyone, every single one of them, the best social strategists, the best creative minds, the best graphic designers. I'm so lucky I have the most incredible team. And so I would say if you're looking for, consulting for digital marketing, and that's organic social, paid social, affiliate marketing, blog, technical writing, website development, video production. We do it all. And I just want to ensure that I'm working with good people, and any friend of Justin's, I will always say, is a friend of mine. So
literally
come on by.
One of my favorite things about this podcast is we always link people with our actual guests. So if you're watching this and you wanted a personal introduction to Tyler, I take no affiliates. There's no referrals. This has nothing to do with any of that. I only co-sign actual practitioners. So I appreciate you taking the time, Tyler. I know we need to connect on my stuff soon.
Yes, we do.
I'm sure as soon as I can get to New York City, it'll be fun to catch up in person.
Would love that. Thanks for having me, Justin. I appreciate you.
Awesome, brother. Crush it. See ya.
Bye, dude.
Bye.